discussion on rope. So some stores sell it by the foot. Um, some stores only sell it pre-cut length. Most stores sell both. Usually, if you're buying a small amount, you better have to find it by the foot if it's available. But often, if you're buying a lot, it's actually cheaper. If you look at the per foot price for the exact same thing in a 100-foot pre-cut, it's actually way cheaper just to buy a bundle. Since I do enough projects, I always just buy extra and I'll just use it on a future project. So there's lots of different kinds of rope and twine and string and all sorts of stuff. What you really want is a polyester line, and the reason you want polyester is it's woven from a lot of very thin, small fibers that together are very strong. It's also highly resistant to fraying and has incredible strength. So I'll show you what not to buy. So what not to buy. Here's a natural product. If you take a look at it, you can see it's very fibrous. This will fray extremely fast. Not a good idea. You also don't want anything that's very small in diameter and single-stranded. That will break very fast too. And that's a cotton line. We're at Menards today, and as you can see here, the polyester lines all have load ratings. You can see here, 70 pounds, 100 pounds. These are very strong and small and inexpensive rope. For our project, we're going to be using the classic 3/16 polyester, rated for 70 pounds. Like very strong, very light. You can cut it to any length you want and just melt the ends because it's plastic. How do you tell the difference between, if you look, I'm just looking at the shelf, there's lots of different types of polyester. What it should be is it should feel soft and real bendable, like a piece of linen fabric. I'll give you another example. Here's this is polypropylene. It looks the same, but actually it's very hard. It makes a crackling noise. This stuff's terrible. So today we're just going to buy a 100-foot, 3/16, 70 pound, $7. You'll probably use 10 to 20 feet of this, which means you could do 4 bikes with $7 worth of rope. Very simple. All right, so on to the pulley. So I'll show you what not to buy first. There. Here's what you don't want. You see here how this hole cannot rotate? That means that the rope can get twisted on it and then you'll be untwisting it all the time. That's not what you want. This is useful in other applications, but not here. What you want is one like this. You see how it can spin? Similar to like a cord on a dog leash, it has this loop that allows it to untwist itself when you put force on it. Now this is not the one you want. You would want a little bit smaller. The one we're using today is $1.59. It's rated for 25 pounds. This is more than enough.
All right.
So ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So when choosing the pulley and rope, what I typically do is I buy the rope first. That's 3/16, and I don't know if you can see the loose end here, but basically this piece of rope has to fit through this top part of the pulley, and as you can see, if you just eyeball it, you can see there's plenty of slack there because this rope gets smaller when under tension. As you pull it, the diameter gets smaller. So if you think that's going to break or you have a heavy bike, no problem. Just go up to the next one, $2.19. You could get a quarter-inch or larger rope through that. So when in doubt, go big. It's not going to hurt you to use a small rope on a large pulley. Not a big deal. So when attaching to the bike, you can tie the rope on, you can hook it on, or you can get creative. On this project, I use something like this, couple bucks. It's just a simple, I'll see it better like that. It's very similar again to what you'd use on a dog. I mean, there's a million choices here. You can go big or small. The reason I choose the big one is not that because it needs to be so strong, but the real small ones are hard to get your hands on and it hurts my arthritis and stuff. Just get a big one. They're a couple of bucks. If you want to be cheaper, you can use something like this for like a dog. One of these other classic, that'll work well. But you've got to find something that's small on the bike. If you use, something of a diameter like that, I'm sure you can find a place to hook it. Plus, if you use a bigger one, you can loop it around itself and just hook this on the rope itself. So kind of up to you. I mean, usually on projects, the hardware is the most expensive thing and the labor is the cheapest. So there's a whole variety here. Pick what you want. Just make sure you don't pick something that has an open-ended hook like this. The temptation's there to just hook it on, but what happens is they tend to slip off. If your hand slips on the rope, this will slip off and then it bangs you in the head. So you want one that locks shut. So the rope cleats, again, many different sizes. These are $1.49. This is a 4.5 inch. The temptation to use something smaller like this, because you can save 70 cents. The problem is you can't wrap a lot of rope around that, and frankly it gets hard to get your hand in there. I suggest going big. And actually I think I used one this size on this project. One of these two I forget, but bigger is better. Again, these are $2, not a lot of money. So another really simple way to save money on projects is to plan ahead. And the best way to do that is to have a general list of things you might want, not necessarily written down. And then every time you go to the store, which for me is twice a week, go to the clearance section. It's amazing what you can find on clearance. There's tools, all sorts of stuff. And we'll have a whole section on, we'll have to have a chat about tools, what not to buy. We're just at Menards today. There's an entire aisle of clearance. Check it out. You never know what you'll find. You might find things that are often in the wrong color. You can just repaint them. So 50 cents a spray paint. It's a simple example. Say, you wanted to put a bookshelf up. These are ungodly strong, but you wanted it white. Well, you can sand this and paint it for $2, and I got it for $6 instead of 12. So think outside the box. So quickly on the topic of drill bits, in general, people are often tempted to gravitate towards drill bits like this with a hex shank because it's easier to put them in and out, or you can use quick release. I'm telling you right now that these are always poor quality and tend to break. Plus you break one and now you have an incomplete set. If you instead opt for a traditional drill, which has a round shank all the way down, and chuck these up in a drill, if you lose a drill here, you can just come and buy extra drills. I mean, we're just at a home improvement store. You can see that they sell individual drills of every size. You can keep a good quality drill bit freshly stocked with drills that you tend to brain out or break. Let me tell you something else. These hex shanks, I'm just going to wing one here, 7/64, $3.29. The exact same size. Here, $4.50. They're, these hex shanks are more expensive, and basically they tend to break, and I typically don't buy them. The only time they're ever useful is for a very small kit where you're just hanging pictures or something where you're not putting a lot of pressure. But for the most part, I would stick to traditional bits. Okay, so the eye bolts you want to do, be careful when you go to the store. Because you go looking for an eye bolt like this, but there's actually two basic types. This is a machine thread. This is supposed to have a nut on it, like through a piece of wood. Don't buy this machine thread. You see how fine it is? That's not what you want. You want a wood thread, which looks like this. See how there's a taper tip, big, thick tread? That's what you want. Now, I didn't bring the pulley with me, but what you basically want here is an eye bolt that this diameter of this round part will fit through the loop on the top of the pulley. Now, you can, since this is made out of a solid piece of metal, you can just try to thread this through the top of the pulley. It should easily slide. You shouldn't have to fight it. If you do, either get a bigger pulley or get a smaller one of these. And again, if you look at load rating on these are rated for 120 pounds. There's no way you're going to exceed that. And when they say 120 pounds, that's when this thing starts bending open. So, this is plenty strong. Now, you can be tempted to buy a stubby one. I call this a stubby. You see how it's real short? But the problem is that when you're going through the drywall, you're going through 5/8 inch from here to here. That's half of this threaded part just to get to the drywall, which has no structure whatsoever. So you're only getting in this last little bit of the tip into the wood. That's why on this project, I bought a much longer one, like this, so that the drywall ends, the part you see stops about the top of this tape. There's the drywall, and then all this thread is into the wood. That's never coming out. So very strong. All right, so as far as the screws go, you're gonna need 2 screws. to attach that bolt cleat to the wall. Now, the two problems people have the most with screws, especially if you're not real tool savvy, is that they have a trouble driving the screw in, and you strip the head of the screw out. The two ways to get around that are to A, drill a pilot hole, which I did on this project. I drilled a 1/8 inch thick or diameter hole into where I'm going to shoot the screw. That means that the turning force is just driving the screw in, much easier. The other thing too is that I don't use Phillips head screws anymore. If you don't know what a Phillips is, it looks like this. It's a plus sign. I use Torx. Looks like this. It basically is a star pattern. A lot of people don't know what Torx are, and they're becoming more popular than ever today. The Torx, you can put more force in them and they never strip out, even with the drill at a slight angle. You don't have to fight them nearly as much, and they're wonderful. The only problem with Torx is that unlike a Phillips, where you can use a slightly too big or too small Phillips size bit and still shoot the screw, with Torx you need the exact correct bit. Now on the upside, most Torx boxes will tell you exactly what size bit you need. You can see this one right here. It says T20 required. Most of these, almost all Torx boxes, because they're still relatively new, almost always still come with a free bit. And I'll go down to the bits and explain to you why you don't want to use those. But suffice to say, you can literally use any screw you want. The only screw I would suggest not using is a drywall screw, and the reason is as those tend to snap under a lot of force. What you want is a multi-purpose construction screw. I don't care what the coating is. I don't really care this, that, or the other. You just want a general purpose construction screw. Usually you can tell them because they're not painted black. The drywall ones have a black paint to them and they look very thin. You want a nice heavy shank. You can see right here, the other type, if you don't know what to buy, just buy exterior deck screws. They're called deck screws, exterior screws. Those have an extra coating on them so they won't rust when they're underwater all the time. But you just want a regular purpose construction screw. You don't want a drywall screw. So my lovely assistant will put in the picture-in-picture the two sets of screws I lined up. But in general, the difference between construction screws and drywall screws, besides the fact that it literally says that right on the box, drywall screws are for one thing, holding drywall to a stud. They're a little bit thinner than construction, and it's kind of hard, if you never worked with these, to know the difference. But the thing is these aren't very strong. They're not meant to hold heavy things. They're meant to hold drywall, which is not that, doesn't have to be that strong. They're a lot cheaper, and they come in a million different lengths. They're handy for general projects, but when it has to be strong, don't use these because they'll bend, break, and drywall screws only come in Phillips head because they're for high-speed drills. That they put a million of them in. They're meant to be used once. If you take them in and out, they tend to strip and break. Construction screws, on the other hand, are a lot stronger. They cost more, but they're a lot stronger, and a lot of times they come with coatings for outside. The other big difference you'll note, if you look at these ones here, you'll notice that the tip, I don't know if this shows up on camera, can you see that? The tip literally has a drill bit baked into it, which helps further carve the hole out as it goes in. Whereas a drywall screw does not do that, and it has a thinner shank. So, you feel me? So here's another example of a drill tip. You can kind of see the drill tip there. So I know I talked about it a little bit in the video, but drilling a pilot hole. Generally speaking, for a standard construction screw, they all basically have the same diameter of shank. It's just the length that changes, which works great because you can just almost always use a 1/8 inch drill bit as a pilot hole. If you want to come look, what you want to do is you want to remove the material of the hole where the solid part of the shank is going, because all that's going to do is make it tight. You just want the thread part to bite into the wood. So you want it just slightly less than the screw diameter. If you're not sure, you can just take a scrap piece of wood, drill a hole, and then shoot the screw in it and see if you think it's strong enough. If the hole's too big, well then use a smaller drill. Experiment a little. Not that big a deal. Alright, So, on the topic of driver bits, I said earlier that a package of these, the Torx drive, almost always comes with a tip. What it's going to look like, this is the wrong size, but it's going to look about like that. And you're like, hey, great, I don't have to buy a bit. But here's the problem with these, is that if you try to chuck these in a drill, you can get away with it. I'll just show you. You have to chuck it in like that, which means that this whole thing has to get really close to the work, and it makes it hard to work. It's hard to get the drill that close when you have something sinking a screw in. It tends to rub on a lot of things. So it makes more sense you have a bit that sticks out. So the common solution to that in the handyman world, as seen on TV, is a magnet adapter like this. That gets you a nice length. The only problem with these magnet adapters is the magnets aren't very strong. And especially with Torx, the Torx bit, when you get done driving it and you pull the drill out, the bit will literally stay in the screw. And it's really irritating when you're trying to shoot a lot of screws. So, what do I use? These. I use something that looks like this. It's a little bit longer. It gets you the reach you need, but yet it can be firmly held. These you can just chuck in a drill like this. Do it all the time. That works great if you only have a drill. I prefer to work with a drill and an impact, and the reason for that is that if you want to drill a hole and shoot a screw, you have to take the drill bit out, put this in, and then shoot the screw. Now, if you don't do it very often, then that'll work, but if you do a lot of projects, you might want to consider having 2 drills, or a drill and an impact, which is a real common combo you can buy for $150, $200. I'm not going to go into why all my brands, I'm picky about tool brands because every tool person out there thinks their brand is the best. So whatever, we'll talk about that later. Yep. So the way I always do projects is I use a drill for drilling with drill bits in general, and I use an impact gun for driving. And the thing about impact guns is because it's an impact, it doesn't put stress on your wrist. And so for small screws like this, you wouldn't think it would hurt your wrist. Shoot a couple of them, no big deal. But when you shoot a box of 500, your wrist will be pretty sore at the end of the day with the drill. If you go to an impact gun, it's lighter, it's smaller, it's better on battery, and it puts no load on your wrist other than the actual act of lifting, which is a natural lift. The other big thing about impacts, they're all like this, is they have a pull ring here. See how this pulls out? That little groove, the same as what's in these bits, when you put that in, you cannot pull that out. It will never come out unless you release the collar. So I can change bits very quickly. There's a Phillips. When I switch to this one, no problem. And it's in there, it's not going anywhere. And that makes it so that you can just keep a drill bit chucked all the time, and then just, if you need to switch bits or whatever, oh, it's this one, this time I need one that's longer for a weird to reach thing. You can put an extender in and do that for that last hard to reach drill bit. It's a lot easier than dealing with a turn chuck like this. It's just easier. The better tools will also have belt hooks, which, I suppose if you had jeans you could hang it. Most of the time what I do is I hang it, when I'm working I'll hang it, off a ladder or something like that. Whatever works for you. But you don't want to fall on the floor. So this is a pretty standard, serious drill. This, I can do just about anything with a drill this size, but a lot of people just don't really need a large drill. I don't care what anyone else says. You can absolutely use, most of the tool companies sell a smaller line. I have these too. This doesn't have a battery in it at the moment, but these work just as well. They don't have as much power, but for screws of this size, I often use the smaller ones because they're lighter. They're easy to carry. They fit better wherever. The batteries are lighter, and it's just easier to deal with them. It's only for when you're driving big stuff, like you want to shoot like a big lag screw like this, that this thing's going to kind of choke. It won't have enough power to shoot it all the way in. This guy doesn't care. This impact gun cost me, I bought this and the drill that goes with it for $250. I can take lug nuts off a car with this. This thing is a bad boy. And it just goes up from here. So Don't be afraid to invest in a drill and impact set if you want to do a lot of projects. You'll thank yourself. So the drill is the absolute most important tool next to a circular saw. So anyways, I hope that helps. I think that's about it.